Hello everybody. As I'm recording this, we are in extremely close proximity to that red letter day, August 31st, 2024, the Saturday of week one in college football. It is a day that lives in infamy each and every year, where the college football season begins and everything else goes away. All our sorrows, all our pain, all of the struggles that we faced the other months of the year, it all comes to a head. It all goes away just like that. Thank you for joining me here on this video. My name is Brandon Taylor for Ride Along Sports, and today, before we get to that Saturday, we're going to talk about the SEC schedules. I have every one of them on here. I have every game predicted, and some of it may be controversial, but I really think it's probably pretty reasonable what I have here. You can agree, you can disagree. I take any kind of criticism or any kind of praise that you may have for these picks. So let's get right into it. We're going to go alphabetically here, and that means we start with Alabama. And so I'm predicting Alabama to go 10-2. So I think Kalen DeBoer is going to come in here, and he's taking the reins from Nick Saban, alongside Jalen Milroe, a veteran in that offense, and they're going to hit the ground running. And as you can see right there, they get a good start. 3 victories before Kalen DeBoer gets a happy welcome to the SEC. They get Georgia at home, but Georgia prevails. I don't see Georgia slowing down anytime soon. They are, until we see it, until we see Kirby Smart, Carson Beck, and the Georgia Bulldogs kind of lack some of the awareness, some of the ability, some of the game management that they've had in previous years. I don't see any slowing up from the Bulldogs, and we'll get to them in just a moment. But let's continue with Alabama here. They win at Auburn. They win at home versus South Carolina. And here's where we come to another crossroads. So I mulled this over for a while. I felt they would lose either at Tennessee or at LSU. That's 2 tough environments. That's 2, good teams going into this season. You either have to go to Knoxville or you got to go to Baton Rouge. They're both away games in 2 very, very tough environments. And I felt like Tennessee, I'm high on Tennessee. I'm a little bit higher on Tennessee as I am LSU. I feel like Alabama can go in and beat LSU, as you can see right there. But I think Alabama goes in there, and that environment, I don't know if necessarily they get to Jalen Milroe. I don't know if that's the difference in the ball game. But something that takes place, something occurs. The Tide fall in Knoxville, but they win out. They beat Missouri. They beat that LSU team. They beat Mercer. They go to Norman, Oklahoma, and in Oklahoma's debut in the SEC, debut season in the SEC, they lose to Alabama, so they get a taste of what we've all experienced in years past. And then they win the Iron Bowl, and this time I don't think it's close. I don't think this is a year where Auburn shocks the world or anything, and we'll get to them in just a moment as well. I feel a little bit of confidence in Auburn, but for Alabama's sake, 10-2 on the year, and I think that's very reasonable. Their over-under from CBS Sports right here is showing them at over-under 9.5, so they exceed that, and I think that is a win for Kalen DeBoer and Alabama fans in general. So moving along, we got the Arkansas Razorbacks and Sam Pittman. His seat is extremely hot. It's on fire, and I think more so than Billy Napier, I think Sam Pittman's job this season is in the most jeopardy. And if they don't go to a bowl game, he's going to be out of a job. And we all know who's probably going to step right into his place. But I got him going 4-8, which would mean that Sam Pittman will be looking for a new job, or maybe just retiring altogether. I feel like he'll probably just hang up the whistle and retire if that is the case. They start off the year with a victory That's Pine Bluff. They'll play that game in Little Rock, funny enough. They go to Oklahoma State and lose that game. They get a good win the very next week against Alabama Birmingham, UAB. But then they go on a really rough patch here. They travel to Auburn and lose. They have their game there in Arlington versus Texas A&M. They lose that one. And they get Tennessee at home, and Tennessee comes out firing on all cylinders, and they beat the Razorbacks for the open date. We have 2 open dates this year, if you haven't noticed. LSU probably runs through them pretty tough here. Yeah, that's going to be an ugly game. But Arkansas gets a good, I would say a good SEC win. An SEC win is an SEC win. It's at Mississippi State, so the Bulldogs will lose. And no surprise in the Ole Miss game. No funny business. Maybe a little bit of funny business. But they travel to Oxford and they lose that game. Actually, no, they have that one at home. Excuse me. But they lose that game as well. And then after the other bye week, they lose to Texas. And they get their last win versus Louisiana Tech before losing in Columbia, Missouri. And they go 4-8. Sam Pittman is out, and Arkansas fans are looking for anything to heal the wounds that they've had the past few seasons. So it's tough up there in Fayetteville, Arkansas. But greater days are coming. Trust me, Arkansas fans. Moving right along here, we move on to Auburn, and I have a little bit of faith in Auburn. I think they go 7-5 this season. Hugh Freeze, alongside Peyton Thorne. A lot of people question Hugh, why he didn't go in the portal and get a brand spanking new quarterback, but Hugh Freeze is known for his relationships that he develops with players, recruits, but his players as well. He would rather coach up his players. He'd rather develop players. And he feels like he can do that with Peyton Thorne. And if Peyton Thorne can take that next step up this season, they can get some rhythm in these games, I think they have a chance of going 7-5. And as you see right there, they win their first 4 games. They got Alabama, A&M, California, New Mexico, and then they beat Arkansas. But they lose at home to Oklahoma. And I failed to put that there, but they lose at Georgia too. They lose at Columbia, Missouri. There are some tough road games this season. They do beat Kentucky, though. They go to Kentucky, and they beat that Kentucky Wildcats team. They win at home versus Vanderbilt, and they win UL Monroe. But Texas A&M comes to town, and Mike Elko gets done. And like we seen just a moment ago when I was talking about Alabama, I don't think there's any surprises in this year's Iron Bowl. Auburn loses, but they go 7-5, and I think that is a step up from the last season. They went 5-7 last year. They go 7-5. They flip it around, and there's some hope for the future. And Hugh Freeze will continue if his coaching is consistent. If they're not losing games they're supposed to lose, if they're winning games they're supposed to win. Now, you could argue that a game like Missouri could be a toss-up. Even Oklahoma could possibly be a toss-up. And Texas A&M, for that matter. We don't really know what Texas A&M is going to look like under Mike Elko. That's just to be determined. But this is where I have them at 7-5. And let's move right along here. The next team is the Florida Gators and Billy Napier's warm seat. A lot of people think he's going to be out of a job by the end of the year. And look, he may very well be. But they at least start the season hot. They do win the game this Saturday versus Miami. They beat Samford. They beat Texas A&M. They go to Starkville and beat Mississippi State. So right off the bat, they have 2 SEC wins, that early in the season, and Miami being a Power 4 win. So they start off really hot. And after Central Florida, I wouldn't be surprised if they're not ranked at that point. But then, as you can see right there, they hit this really bad rough patch. They lose in Knoxville. They lose at home versus Kentucky. They had the world's largest cocktail party in Jacksonville, Florida versus Georgia, the Florida-Georgia game there. They lose to Georgia. Georgia puts it on them pretty good. And then they immediately have to go to Austin, Texas, and face Steve Sarkisian's fiery team there, the Texas Longhorns, a team full of veterans, a team that's looking to take a shot at the SEC in their first year, and will have a shot at it, definitely. But they lose at home versus LSU and lose versus Ole Miss at home. And it's the Swamp is a tough environment, but they lose a lot of these games. They lose to Kentucky at home, like I said. They lose to LSU and to Ole Miss all at home. And that just goes to show, like, your environment can only do so much now. LSU is kind of an anomaly there. LSU has won where they didn't have that great of teams, but they can lose. But as you can see right there, I have them beating Florida State at Florida State there to end the season. We don't know about Florida State. We saw what happened in week 1. That could be an outlier. Florida State could end up having a great season. But as it stands, I have Florida going 6-6. I think Billy Napier's job is saved. I think he continues on, and they look ahead to the future. Now, next season, they're going to want him to step up to the next level. But for right now, I think his job is going to be safe after this season. Moving right along now, we got the Georgia Bulldogs, and to no surprise, they go 12-0. They win every single game. And, the only challenges that I see, I don't see a challenge versus Clemson. I don't see, really the only challenges are probably at Alabama, at Ole Miss, and at Texas. And really that Texas game, is going to be played there right in the smack dab in the middle of the season, and what I probably predict to be the SEC championship game as well. You have to go to those 3 places. And it's not going to be easy, but Kirby Smart is an incredible coach, and he knows how to prepare his team regardless of who they're playing and where the game is going to be played. And I think they'll be ready for that. I think they'll be ready for every game. And until I see them slowing down, until I see like any hiccup, maybe injuries, major injuries, I don't see them lose until they show me that they can lose and that they can play bad football. That's when I'll change my tune. But right now, I can't. They go 12-0 this season. They're in the college football playoff, and they have a good chance of winning the national championship again this year after being in the running for it for the past several years. So that's the Georgia Bulldogs. Moving right along to Kentucky. I have Kentucky going 7-5, and Mark Stoops is, I think he'd be happy with this. I mean, look, they've had some promise. Last year, the year before, they've expected to be a little bit better, but they've kind of been a little bit lackluster. Their over/under is 6.5, so they will exceed that. They get a victory versus Southern Miss and South Carolina. They lose to Georgia. They lose to Ole Miss. They lose at home to Auburn. They travel to Knoxville. Tennessee puts it on them. And then at Texas, you never know what happens late in the season, but I don't think there's any surprise that Texas will get it done there as well. They go to the Swamp and beat Florida, though, right there on October 19th, and that's impressive. Even with Florida being a team that's, not what they've been in past years, but 7-5, a fairly solid season, and they just hope to get some more depth on their team so they can make 8, 9, 10 wins, maybe battle for the SEC next season. So, moving right along, we've got LSU, and the Tigers go 9-3. And, I am not as high on LSU as I am on Tennessee. Garrett Nussmeier has been a backup quarterback for a very long time for this LSU team. So he knows the system. But I just don't know, knowing the system and actually being able to perform and go through the plays and be able to read the defense and do all these things in game is another thing. He may know ball, he may know everything, but until I see what he can do, especially when you get, into the bulk of the SEC schedule, I don't know. I don't see them doing any better than that. It's actually lower than their over-under, because right now I'm seeing their over-under is 9.5. So they get 9, so they go under their over-under odds. But I do have them beating Ole Miss at home, Baton Rouge. It's going to be a night game, ruckus environment. Ole Miss is going to be coming in at a great point where they'll probably be at least where they are at number 6, possibly 5 or top 5 at that point in the season. And it is a trap game for Ole Miss. It really is. And I think it's going to be close, but they get that victory over Ole Miss. And that's something that they can hang their hat on this season. They lose to Texas A&M at Texas A&M, which may be interesting, but that's the way football goes, especially in the SEC. They lose to Alabama, and they lose to Oklahoma at the end of the season. So you beat a team like Ole Miss, which is a top 10, top 6, top 5 team. Then you lose at Texas A&M, at home to Alabama, and at home to Oklahoma. Look, that's the SEC. That's just how it goes sometimes. But they go 9-3, and I think they'll be happy with that. They'll get a good bowl. They won't be battling for a playoff position, but nonetheless, they're not regressing too far from what they've been. Moving right along here, the Missouri Tigers. Some people are high on them. Some people are thinking that they're a little overrated this season. They start very well here. As you see, they win their first 7 games, including a victory at Texas A&M and at home to Auburn. But the bulk of that, if you don't include Vanderbilt, is there's a lot of fluff in there. They have to go to UMass, though, which is interesting. But when they go to Alabama, they knock them back down to earth. Alabama Crimson Tide comes in there, in Tuscaloosa, and they take care of the Tigers. Missouri loses at home to Oklahoma, and they go to Columbia, South Carolina, and probably a pretty good close game there. They come up short, but they go to Starkville, beat Mississippi State, beat Arkansas at home. They end 9-3, and they're just out of a reach of a playoff spot as well. They'll still get a good bowl. And Eli Drinkwitz does not get put on the hot seat, nor should he. The team is, they'll be back in the running. They'll be back probably around this same level, probably next year. Drink has got a good thing going on up there in Como. So 9-3 for the Tigers. Moving right along to Mississippi State. A lot of people not giving Mississippi State credit. You've got Jeff Levy coming in, somebody that, he went to Oklahoma. He's been offensive coordinator at Ole Miss before. He's got this high throttle, high octane offense. And Mississippi State's, they're not going to have a defense that's not terrible, that may actually be able to, interrupt a lot of these teams. But look, this is a work in progress. There's a lot of damage to that program, and I think Jeff Levy can get them back on track, but it's not this season. He can only do so much. Their over-under, if I'm correct, was 4.5, so they exceed that. They go 5-7. Look, you could make an argument they could win 6 games and go to a bowl game. If he did, if Jeff Levy can lead this Mississippi State Bulldogs team to a bowl game in year 1, where he's completely revamping this team, ACC Coach of the Year, contender right there. They start the year off with 3 victories. They lose at home to Florida. They go to Texas. They lose. They lose at Georgia. 2 extremely tough games in a row. They lose at home to Texas A&M, but they beat Arkansas, because you've got to beat Arkansas. You beat UMass. And then there's some very tough road games for the Bulldogs. They go to Knoxville and lose. They lose to Missouri at home. And in the Egg Bowl, Ole Miss gets it done. I don't see a situation where Mississippi State spoils any playoff hopes for Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is going to pretty much handle that. It's going to be in Oxford. Great time slot. Not on Thanksgiving this year. It's going to be on Friday, Black Friday, 2:30 Central, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. 5-7 for Jeff Lebby and the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Moving right along, folks, let's get on to Oklahoma, a newcomer in the Southeastern Conference, and they get a very respectable 8-4 this year. And as you can see right here, they start off their SEC slate pretty hot. They beat Tennessee at home. They go to Auburn, and they beat the Tigers at their place. So their over-under, if you excuse me for a moment, is 7.5. So I have them going over that as well. They win at home versus South Carolina. They go to Ole Miss, go to Oxford. I expect a lot of fans to be in Oxford for that one. But they ultimately lose. They beat Maine. And at the end of the season, they go to Baton Rouge, and in a crazy series of events, they beat LSU in Death Valley. You may think I'm crazy for saying that, but that's what I envision. LSU, a little inconsistent there at the end of the season. Oklahoma gets it done. And let's continue on. We're getting towards the latter end of the SEC schedule. The SEC teams, rather. We got Ole Miss right here. A team with so many title aspirations, playoff aspirations, SEC championship game aspirations. I have them going 10-2 here. Their over-under's 9.5, so they exceed that. They go 10-2. I think it's safe to say they win all their games. They probably going into Kentucky, depending on what the other schools are, they're probably going to be at 5 or greater at that point. Of course, they may just be idle. They may be at 6 by the time they get to that point. They go to South Carolina. The first really, honestly, tough test. Kentucky's going to be a tough test. But to travel to Columbia, South Carolina, and that's a big stadium, and it's going to be a night game. Potential trap game for the Rebels. But I anticipate them, even if they struggle in the game, even if Jackson Dart struggles a little bit, and they get to him, and they're not able maybe to establish a run game or something like that, I still think they have enough to compensate and get it done in that game. But they go to Baton Rouge, and in a huge game, LSU, I have them getting the victory there. I have LSU winning that game. There's a great chance that Ole Miss goes down there and beats the brakes off of the Tigers. But for the sake of this, I say LSU prevails in that game. But they have some time to rest because they have an open date right after that to prepare for Oklahoma coming to town. They beat the Sooners, and then they go to Arkansas. They beat the Razorbacks, but then here comes the Georgia game. And last year, this game was pretty hyped. I know we here at Ride Along Sports really overhyped this game. Georgia gets it done, and I can't tell you at this moment, how that game's going to be. Is it going to be a close game? Is it going to be a barn burner? Or is Georgia going to run away with it? I'm not sure. I just know Georgia's going to win that game. And look, luckily the Rebels have another open date. And I don't know if that's a bad thing or that's a good thing. Yes, you have time to rest up, but you also kind of, you may throw your rhythm off. But they travel to the Swamp and they beat Florida down there. Now that game is projected. It's actually going to be a early game. So good luck, Ole Miss. You prevailed in that department. And then in the Egg Bowl, they beat Mississippi State, and they finish 3rd or 4th in the SEC, and they most likely have a playoff position just based on, all the factors that go into it, and an at-large position at the very least. So moving on from the Rebels to the Gamecocks. Oh boy. So Shane Beamer is running a pretty rough program out there in Columbia, South Carolina. it's not looking good for him either. Him and Sam Pittman are in a kind of a similar situation. Honestly, don't know if Shane Beamer's out of a job after this year or not. They go 4-8. They win no SEC games, but they do manage to beat Clemson at the end of the year, which you may think I'm an idiot for saying that, but I just don't have a lot of faith in Clemson. Yes, they're still recruiting high school. Dabo's still getting good players. He's still the coach that he was when he won all those national titles, even though he's kind of out of touch and he won't do the modern recruiting and everything. They're still getting, doing some NIL, whatever. They're doing as much as they can, but not as much as they should be. But South Carolina sneaks up in there, and in that in-state rival, it's one of those weird things where your in-state rival, you beat them, and that's what's going to happen here. But 4-8, if Beamer still has a job, his seat is going to be literally in flames as soon as he sits down after that last game this season. So moving on from the Gamecocks, next one on the list is we got the Texas Longhorns. The big, strong Texas Longhorns coming in from the Big 12, and they're going to come in with feet, like they're going to be running. Like before they hit the ground, they're going to be in the running position that way. As soon as their feet hits the ground in the SEC, they're going to get it all done. Yes, they beat the brakes off of Michigan in week 2. There's no doubt in my mind that they beat Michigan. I don't care if they're playing that game on the moon. Texas is winning that game. Michigan is not the team that everybody says they are. They've taken a step down this year. Don't at me. They beat Mississippi State. They beat Oklahoma. The Red River rivalry, the Red River shootout, the Red River SEC football game, whatever they're going to call it this year, in Dallas. They beat Oklahoma. Look, could be a crazy game. It's an SEC game. That's what's I'm very excited that is an SEC game now. Like that, I'm almost giddy because of that. They beat Florida. They win all the games that they're supposed to win. They do lose to Georgia at home, but Georgia is a powerhouse. And I'm telling you right now, Texas is going 11-1. Georgia's going 12-0. You're going to see a rematch, Georgia and Texas, in the SEC championship game. Whoever wins that game, I anticipate it to be Georgia, could be Texas. They're going to the playoff. They're going to get the first round bye. And whoever that SEC team is there that wins that SEC championship, probably going to be your national title winner. But maybe I'm a little biased. Continuing on, we got 2 more. The Tennessee Volunteers. I'm higher on the Tennessee Volunteers than a lot of people think I should be. Tennessee is over under 9.5, so I got them just over that at 10-2. As you can see, they lose at Oklahoma and they lose at Georgia. 2, respectable wins. Oklahoma's not a bad team. You have to go there to Norman, and you have to go to Georgia and play in Sanford Stadium. But they beat Alabama, and that is the highlight of their season. Tennessee, if they can do anything close to what I have right here on the screen, they're going to the playoff. And I don't know if you want to call them a dark horse, if you want to call them underrated, because I don't know what everybody's opinions are on them. I'm high on the Tennessee Volunteers. I think they do big things this year, and I think they surprise a lot of people. They beat Florida, they beat Alabama, they beat Kentucky, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, and like I said, they lose to Oklahoma and Georgia. And they come out of this season, Josh Heupel, with a pat on his back because they did something great. And as we move on from the Tennessee Volunteers and their great season, we go to the Vanderbilt Commodores, the Texas A&M Aggies. Look, Texas A&M. Oh, Texas A&M. Mike Elko is going to be he's going to be a more competent coach than old Jimbo Fisher is. He's going to come in here. They're going to win 6. They're going to go 6-6. They are going to lose to Notre Dame in that first game. At first I'd kind of picked Notre Dame to win that. Texas A&M to win that game. But it's hard at this point for me to pick against Notre Dame in this game. But A&M gets a victory at Mississippi State, at South Carolina, and they lose a lot of SEC games. At Florida, they lose. They lose at home to Missouri. They lose at home to LSU. They go to Auburn and get beat, and they get just kicked in the teeth versus Texas. And I know that's going to be a frustrating game for them because Texas is coming in and taking the spotlight away from the Aggies. But that is what it is. Mike Elko, in his first year, is going to go 6-6. They're going to go to a bowl game, and I think that's going to be just okay. And I think people are going to be maybe not happy, maybe not excited, but they're going to be okay with it. So, last team, the Vanderbilt Commodores. And if you're looking at this and you see one funny thing, it's not a mistake, folks. I have a W beside South Carolina. That's right. Yep. Is that... wait. Huh. Clark Lee is going to take this Vanderbilt Commodores team into Columbia, South Carolina. They're going to beat the Gamecocks. They're going to do it. And look, there's a chance. Clark Lee has been putting a lot of work in. Look, he has nothing to lose except his job, okay? Honestly, whoever inherits the Vanderbilt team as a head coach, there's a lot immediately on your shoulders because all right, what can we do? Is there anything we can do to make this team, have any sort of success like they did, back in the day? A bowl game would be incredible. I hope Vanderbilt does go to a bowl game. I want them to be successful just like the rest of the SEC. If you're looking at the schedule here, let's pick through this. They could beat Virginia Tech, first game of the season. I predict they lose that one. Another game they could win, maybe at Kentucky, maybe at Missouri. Maybe they can sneak up on those teams. I just don't see it. I think it's too far of a stretch. They got something brewing up there in Nashville, and I'm not sure what it is, but they're getting a lot of transfers in. They're getting coaches. You may be looking at Vanderbilt in, not as obviously a contender, but they will be in bowl games within the next 2 years. You heard it here, folks. So that does it for the SEC schedules. And I'm going to put this right here up on the screen, and we're going to show you all of it right here compiled on one big screen. As you can see, let's run through this one more time. Alabama's going 10-2. Arkansas is going 4-8. Auburn's going 7-5. Florida's going 6-6. Big 12-0 for the Georgia Bulldogs. 7-5 for Kentucky. LSU is going to go 9-3. Missouri is going to go 9-3 as well. Mississippi State is going to get a respectable 5-7 for what they are right now. Oklahoma is going to be 7-5. The Ole Miss Rebels 10-2. South Carolina 4-8. Texas Longhorns 11-1. Tennessee Vols 10-2. Texas A&M 6-6, and the Vanderbilt Commodores go 4-8 on the season. This is your Ride Along Sports 2024 SEC record predictions, your schedule predictions, and all those good things. Look, it's going to be a great season. I've got a lot of great content for you here at Ride Along Sports, so I hope you'll subscribe. I hope you'll look to our other feeds, our social medias, at Ride Along Sports. You can find the TikTok. You can find an Instagram. I'm going to try to do more posting there this season and beyond. And that's about all I got for you today. Thank you for joining us here for the SEC schedule predictions. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you agree, what you disagree with, tell me what you think your team is going to do. And just keep on rocking, folks. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you in the next video. Enjoy the weekend if I don't see you again, and peace.